All right, hello everybody. So here's our second half of the Chromaticism lecture. If you haven't watched the first one yet, go ahead and watch that one because that gives more of a broader introduction to the concept, along with talking about how to look at chords in the context of analysis. This one is more concerned with how to look at chords sort of out of context or in a sort of composition way through part writing and construction. It's almost like the reverse engineering of the concept of chromaticism or music, right? So that's what we're concerned with here. Just as a recap, right, about what secondary dominants are, there's sort of like a little time warp in a new key. It's sort of like we slip into a key or we get that magnetic emphasis on something that is not tonic. They are not, and this is very important, right? They are not a modulation. Okay, they're not modulating, though they will be used to modulate, and that's actually where we're heading with this. But the concept does not mean that we are like moving into a new key. You're still in the key of C if you have an F sharp as part of a 5 of 5. Like we haven't moved to the key of G. However, what we'll see is if you start having a lot of F sharps and no more F naturals, you're probably in the key of G. And that's how modulation sort of leads to tonicization, or sorry, tonicization leads to modulation. But that's something we'll be doing later down the line. So think about your process also. Your process is one, if you're looking at the chord, just don't panic, right? Seems kind of easy to do right now, but I promise things will get a little bit weirder looking at some point. Don't panic, just skip the chord. Where did it go? And up to this point, all we've seen outside of the one little 7 diminished chord of 2 that I showed you in the Bach, all we've seen are 5s of 5s and 5/7 of 5s. And that's really largely we're going to see for quite a while, and that's the concept of a secondary dominant chord. Cool. So thinking about these as like a reverse engineering, right? So actually part writing or constructing them, the process is very similar to how we would think about them as an analysis. First, don't panic, right? What key are we in? And what I mean by that is what key are we in, right? What is this? That has nothing to do with this at this point, right? It's like we are literally in the key of G. This exercise is in the key of G. However, we have to then think, what key is this chord in? Because this chord, if it's a secondary function chord, is in a different key. So this, if you've been in my classes before, is why I harp on so much about key signatures, right? That you know your key signatures, and when you're talking about a note as a concept, when you say F, and I may correct you in class and say F sharp, right? To make sure that you're speaking very specifically about it, because now your key signatures are going to start lying to you, right? Yeah, this little exercise is in the key of G, but everything we're going to be writing is not in the key of G. Does that make sense? Because we're writing a chromatic moment, a little, like I said, a time warp, a slip. We're going to slip into another key, and deal with a lot of different parameters there. So what we think of is, well, what key is this chord in? Well, you think, what is under the slash, right? Because this is a 5. We're building some sort of 5/7. So the quality of the chord that we're constructing here is major minor, right? It's the dominant 7th chord, but it's the 5 of the 5. So we're thinking, what is under the slash? That's the key this chord is in. Okay, so you have to think in the key of G, we're building a 5/7 of the 5. Well, in the key of G, what is 5? You think G, B, D, right? This chord is in the key of D. We still write it with the key signature of G, but we're having to use the notes that are found in the key of D, which is why we're going to end up with accidentals, right? Because there's a difference between those two keys. So let's think about that. We're writing the 5 of 5. So in the key of G, 5 is D. Okay, so now we're thinking in the key of D, right? We're thinking of the key of the 5. In the key of D, what is 5? So now you're thinking D, right? Okay, E, F sharp, G, A. We are building a chord built on A. Okay, so A, and you stack up thirds, you make your little snowman. This process is exactly the same as what we've been doing forever, right? This is just, you're building a chord, a diatonic chord, but you're thinking of it in a different key. Okay, so A, C, E, G, but this chord needs to fit into the key of D major, which is fat cats, so 2 sharps, right? A, C sharp, E, G. That's the chord we're building and spelling over here. And since I have this written in Grandstaff, I mean, we can voice it in SATB. So maybe you have something that looks like this, E, and G. And that's a chromatic chord because the C sharp is not in the key signature, right? That's the chromaticism. That's the thought process, right? So it's not like, okay, we'll look, skip, and go backwards, right? You sort of have to kind of, take some, I don't know. I like to think of it as reverse engineering because you're taking apart the concept and trying to like reassemble it, if that makes sense. Let's try one more before we jump into some larger examples here. 5/7 of 5. Okay, we are in A minor. Just really quickly about minor. Minor secondary function chords are slightly more complicated because of the way that our key signatures work. So I only say that because as you get to like, I don't want to say weirder key signatures, but ones that are further away from, A minor and stuff like that, you're going to have lots of chords that you're building that may look really crazy. You're going to have sharps and flats and naturals all mixed together. Don't get freaked out. It's just it is the byproduct of having things like harmonic minor and, key signatures with flats in them and all kinds of stuff. So I say that now. It's not going to pop up on this one, but as you're moving through and looking at other keys, it will start to look a little strange, and you might think you're wrong, but you're probably not. So don't get too worried. Okay, cool. So thought process. We're in the key of A minor, but we're not, right? For this exercise, we're thinking, what's the key of the thing under the slash? Okay, so we need to build the 5 of 5. So you think in the key of A, the 5 is E, right? That's the E, right? So now we're thinking in the key of E, what is 5? Because that's the chord we're building, right? E is 5, right? So we're building the 5 in E. Okay, so in the key of E, what is 5? Well, that is B. Notice something I did here. I wrote E major. When we're dealing with building a 5 or a 5/7 or something like that, even though this is a minor exercise, the thing under the slash you can think of as major. The reality is you can think of it as the minor also. You're going to get the same answer, but it's easier with major because you're not going to have to use like forms of minor. You can just think, oh, okay, well, the 5 of 5 is E. In the key of E major, what is 5? It's going to give you the same answer. It will not work like that when we start doing secondary leading tone chords, so the diminished chords that we looked at in the Bach really quickly. That'll be coming up in a couple weeks. So just keep that in mind. Will change that thought process, but for now, it's just use major and you'll be fine. Okay, so in the key of E, 5 is B, and you stack up thirds. You make your little snowman, right? This chord has to fit into the key of E major, which is fat cats go down. So let's see, F sharp, fat cats go down. B, D sharp, F sharp, A. That is a 5/7. It's a major minor chord in the key of E. That's the chord we're spelling over here. And this is kind of strange looking, I guess, right? So I'm just voicing it. You could voice this however you wanted. But you've got a chord in no flats or sharps that has 2 sharps. It's totally fine. It's totally normal. It's now part of your life. This is just a thing that happens in music all the time. Okay, so don't get freaked out by it. It's totally normal, and you're correct. B, D sharp, F sharp, A. It's the 5/7 of 5 in the key of A minor. Cool. Let's try a couple in and out of context again, just to get some help. The good thing is when you're writing part writing like this, you're thinking in context. So you can do the skip it thing because it's not just looking at this chord, right, as an abstraction, not just like, okay, we're writing this. It's like you're writing these chords and they're heard and thought of as a unit, right? So we can think, oh, well, we're writing a 1 in the key of B flat major, right? Well, that would be B flat, and D, and F. Something like that, right? My handwriting's really sloppy. Sorry. But B flat, D, and F, right? There's your 1 chord. And I've doubled the bass, which is doubling the root. It's all good. Then you're like, oh man, what is that chord? I don't know. Well, skip it. What is 5? Right? So you could sort of think backwards, which is nice. And that's actually kind of how I think about it. So we think, okay, in the key of B flat, 5 is what? Well, that's F, right? In the key of F, what is 5? C, right? So that is the chord you're writing here. You're writing a chord built on C. Or, and here's another way to think about this. This is in the key of B flat, right? But for just a minute right there, this little moment, we're thinking of writing 5/7 to 1. But we're not in the key of B flat. We've like slipped into a time warp, right? We've kind of tonicized. We're moving ever so gently towards the key of this. So we're writing that 5/7 to 1 in the key of F. So it's almost like, when you're doing chromaticism, you're just doing diatonicism, right? But you're sort of like ignoring key signatures, if that makes sense. And that really doesn't change for a long time. There's some, chromaticism that gets a little bit kooky, but a lot of secondary function is just that. Like, you're thinking about different elements of diatonicism, but you're focusing on different targets within different keys. Okay, so cool. We're thinking 5/7 to 5 to 5, which is like a C chord going to 5, going to F. So the trick here, and this will always be the trick, right, is that we have to write this chord over here, and we're just spelling it, but we're writing it still. Even though I did this thing where we're thinking in the key of F, the key signature is still B flat. So you're going to have accidentals, right? And you have to make sure that you're always thinking about those accidentals. You think, okay, cool, it's C. And then we're building a C, an E, a G, and a B flat. Great, so C, E, G, B flat. Great, so you go over here and you're like, oh, cool, I'll keep that one there. That'll be oblique, and that one will go up, and awesome. And then you want to be sure that you're not having parallels, because if this F goes up, right, that'll be parallel fifths. So that's got to go down, and maybe it goes like this. I don't know. C, E, B flat, C. We omitted the fifth, no fifth. That's totally fine, right? You could omit the fifth. This is an incomplete 5/7. That means that this chord will be complete, right? And we did that last semester, so that should be pretty straightforward. Except for this chord is wrong, right? This chord, it should send off like alarm bells, right? 5/7 and 5. There's no accidental. And notice what I was saying. I kept saying this like the way students often talk in class, right? I wrote C, E, G, B flat, C, E, G, B flat, except for this is C, E flat, G, right? And you say C, E, G, it's C, E natural, E natural, because that chord has to fit into this key. It has to fit in the F. And in the key of F major, right? Think of that key signature. There is no E flat. There's an E natural. Does that make sense? Okay, hopefully that's making sense. You can resolve this. There's a seventh. It goes down. And that could go up. And that's a leading tone. That wants to go, whoa, hey. That wants to go up like that. If you remember back to the first lecture on chromaticism, I had the accidentals written out, and I was talking about accidentals being set in motion and wanting to remain in motion, right? This exactly is that right here. So I'm going to grab a different color here. This E natural, right, was an E flat, right? Here it is. Here's the E flat. It was an E flat. It's diatonically an E flat. We have raised it to make it an E natural. Once you make it an E natural, so it goes from flat to natural, it wants to go up. It wants to resolve up to F. It also wants to resolve up to F because we're in the key of F here for a second, like we're just sort of slipped into that key. This is the leading tone that wants to go up. Also, and if you've been in my classes, this is kind of like the macro way that I talk about part writing. It's closest to F. It wants to go to F, right? If you have a chord here that's F, A, and C, the E natural is closest to F, resolve it to F. It doesn't have to do that. I mean, it does empirically for the class. I want you to do that. It'll be wrong if you don't. Obviously, music can do anything, but it just sounds really good. It's nice. It doesn't sound bad. I'll play it for you here. Try to remember the voicing. It was like that, right? I think. And then it went like this, like that. It just sounds really nice, right? We had this E natural wanting to resolve up because it's, I don't know, it wants to do that. It sounds good, right? It doesn't have to do that, but it sure is effective if it does that. Cool. Let's try one more. We'll try this in a minor key. Again, minor keys are not harder, they're just tricky because of the way our key signatures work. So you're often going to end up with more accidentals on your chromaticism. So just, don't freak out. Just know that's like part of the deal with dealing with them. So we're in the key of E minor, right? Your one chord is E, G, B. And again, I encourage you to stop the video, maybe voice this out on a piece of paper just to practice. I'll just go ahead and do a voicing, but there are many different options and you could voice this however you want, as long as your voices are, within an octave, and then your bass is within a 12th with your tenor. Okay, cool. So that's your one chord, or an option for the one chord. Let's skip this chord right here. This is the chromatic chord, right? We'll come back to it. We're going to the 5-7. So what is 5-7 in the key of E? You think in the key of E, what is 5? That's B, B, D, F. Well, it's an F sharp, and it's not D natural, it's D sharp, right? That's your leading tone. And this chord must have an accidental. It must have that D sharp. Okay, so let's back up and think, okay, the chord in between needs to be a 5-7 of the 5. Well, we already know the 5, and that's why it's nice doing these in context, right? Because you can sort of have a target that you understand. Okay, B, in the key of B major, what is 5? Because that's this middle chord, right, that we're building. Well, in the key of B major, the 5 is F sharp, right? So we're building a chord that is like, quote unquote, in B, right? It's focusing its energy, its magnetism on B, and then functioning to resolve to that. Well, it's F sharp, A, C, and E. The key of B, right, is 5 sharps. Fat cats go down alleys. I still have to use my fingers for some reason. Fat cats go down alleys. Fat cats go down alleys. Okay. So you're going to have accidentals, right? And a lot of them. Again, this is sort of that highlighting about minor, give you a little kooky. Let's try and resolve this. This is the chord that goes here. F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, and E. The E here is closest to F sharp. It should probably go to F sharp, right? The F sharp, notice also, I didn't put an accidental in because it's there. I have no problem with you writing them in if you want like that. I mean, it's just kind of overkill, but if it helps you sort of remember to put them in, that's cool. So that's F sharp. The A sharp, well, B right there is closest to A sharp. It's a half step down, right? It wants to go down. C sharp, which one of these is closest to C sharp? Well, probably E, right? But here's the problem, right? G is closest to what? Well, G is closest to F sharp, right? And that wants to go down. We have an octave there, but it was approached in contrary motion, which is great. But if you do that, right, if you just go straight up, and like I was doing, you're going to end up with this, which is F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, F sharp. We're missing the 7th, right? Which means the E stays. That's oblique. And we end up with an incomplete chord. Again, it's going to happen a lot, and it's totally fine. Don't get freaked out by that. I often can tell when I'm grading students' homework that you guys are thinking like vertically. You're spelling the chord, and you're thinking of this not as a linear experience, but as like a vertical thing, almost like these are slices of bread, like up and down. And you end up with really weird things because you're not thinking about the voices resolving. You're just thinking about spelling a chord, spelling a chord, spelling a chord, like that. Try not to do that. Try to think like I did. Like, okay, move it smoothly, move it smoothly. Oh, there's no 5th. Whatever. It doesn't matter, right? And again, you don't mind it when you listen to it. It doesn't sound bad in any way. And now all we have to do is resolve this. And this may look really weird. It's like, oh my gosh, how do I resolve it? You do this all the time. You could either just think, okay, I'll just resolve it smoothly, right? Or you can think like you're literally just resolving this in the key of B, right? So like just for a second, again, you're sort of thinking this is 5-7 to 1 in B. And you've been doing that for months and months. And again, lots of ways, well, I guess not lots of ways to do that, but depending upon how you're voicing, you could have a lot of different answers. That needs to go up. It's the leading tone in the key of B, so it wants to resolve up. But even more generally, right, it's a half step away from B, it wants to resolve to B. Also, it was an A natural. It wants to go up, right? It was set in motion. It really wants to. So make it do that. Let it do that. This is the chord seventh. It wants to go down. It's also a half step away from D sharp. It wants to resolve there. And the F sharp here, right, can stay, but look what happened again. What happened? Well, we're missing, this is B, a 5-7. We're missing B, D sharp, F sharp, A. We're missing the seventh. So the question is, what do we do? Like, how do we solve this problem? Think about this. Okay. Sorry, it's getting a little messy here. The number one rule of our part writing, right? And this is why I harp on this from the beginning, is that it wants to move smoothly. The concept and the word I used in 101 was parsimonious. It wants to move as stingily as possible. It wants to use the fewest amount of half steps. If you remember playing those golf games, like those homework assignments, I was trying to get you to think like this, because here's an example. This is wrong, right? We did the homework incorrectly, but there is a correct way to do it if you really just think about, okay, well, what overarching thing is most important? Move it smoothly. What's the answer then? The answer is break the thing I just told you. The only way to get that A smoothly is to do that. And that's correct. Okay? It wants to go up, but this chord has to be spelled correctly. Okay? And this actually sounds super cool. I'm going to try to remember this voicing. Okay, it's E, B, E, G. I'm going to pull up the piano here. I can't play it. Oh no, my piano's not big enough. Okay, so I'll sort of make up a voicing where you can see it. Okay, so there's the one chord, right? You get that. Watch this. You get this nice. So watch this B here, this voice. Again, I'm kind of garbling up this part writing because of the fact that this piano is really small. But watch the B. This is what's cool about it. And then it goes down. And this is why, if you've been like an alto or a tenor or something, this happens a lot in inner voices. Your parts can be like, that. You get these cool chromatic lines. I think it sounds awesome, right? It's really, really neat. And it doesn't so much bother us, right? That this doesn't go up like that, right? It doesn't have to, because it sounds super neat to go like that. That's breaking a quote unquote breaking a rule, right? But it sounds good because the music is moving as smoothly as it possibly can, right? And still spelling the vertical thing that is needed for the harmony to speak. Okay, that's okay. That's actually that's actually the most correct answer and the best correct answer for this. Okay, so that's the reverse engineering. Okay, so you don't panic, right? If you can write these things in context like this, then you can skip the chords, see where it goes, and that's all good. If you can't, right, you don't panic, and then you think, well, what key are we in? What key is this chord in that's underneath the slash, right? That's the key you're thinking in. Okay, this is going to take some practice. It'll be slow at first because you're thinking in other keys, right? The things to remember, right? Just go slowly, make it algorithmic, right? Just really slowly think through the thought process. It doesn't have to be fast. And then don't forget your accidentals, because you will have accidentals. In fact, it's really easy to grade these homework assignments at first, because I can tell, right? I look down at your homework and it's like, oh, there's no accidentals. These are all wrong, right? Because it has to have an accidental. So if you're doing your homework and you're finding yourself not writing in a whole bunch of sharps and flats and stuff like that, just slow down, go back through, check it, make sure you're looking okay. And know that, like I said, it doesn't have to be fast, and we're going to spend a lot of time doing this. And it's going to be a critical skill for not only spelling these chords, obviously, and analyzing them, but we're going to build on it as we talk about not just tonicization, but how that leads to modulation. And modulation is going to, in a lot of ways, dictate how we talk about how music is structured, the form of the music. And that's what we'll spend the second half of the semester talking about.